Everybody, welcome to another edition of Vinyl Fetish up here in the Vinyl Attic. We are in the second fifth of our 100 albums that must be in your collection if you're a vinyl collector. The ones that aren't the most obvious ones, we'll leave those to others. We want to pick the ones that are sort of a little off the beaten path, but are really, really meaningful on some certain level. We're at number 22, I believe. We're slowly moving through the 100. You know, we take our time in the Vinyl Attic because that's the way it is with records. You just want to put it on and spend some time with it. So we've got a really cool record for this edition. We are doing a 1980 Dire Straits album, Making Movies. This was their third album, released in 1980, and it's significant for a couple of reasons. The first album was brilliant and had the Sultans of Swing and put Mark Knopfler and the Dire Straits on the radar of all music-loving people. That song was on the radio constantly in the late 70s. It's followed up by Communique, their second album, which stiffed a little bit. This, still good, but this record is something. There are some albums that just get better and better and better with age, and I want to talk about Dire Straits' third album. It was sort of a point of transition for the band. I mean, it is when David Knopfler, Mark Knopfler's brother, was sort of leaving during the recording of this album, quit the band. Apparently, brothers don't get along. That happens quite frequently in bands. Hello to you, the Robinson brothers. Or the Oasis guys, or, all these stories of brothers and bands usually does not end up well. And so Mark and David Knopfler had a falling out. The rhythm guitarist in this is actually not credited, but it's Sid McGuinness, that a lot of you will know from David Letterman's Most Dangerous Band, from the late night David Letterman show on NBC. Recorded in New York, has these really great sort of epic long songs like Romeo and Juliet, which has been covered by a ton of people, including the Indigo Girls. Skate Away. There is almost a homage to gay culture called Lace Boys, which was kind of refreshing in 1980. It was before all the kind of homophobia set in later in that decade that plagues us still, the sort of romantic notion of the boys on the street. And it is epic and sprawling and is significant for a couple of reasons. This, that comes out in 1980, is really the beginning of the music video era. This idea that if you have a song, you should have a video to go with it. It's before MTV. MTV doesn't even start percolating until a year later in 1981. But some of the videos on this record, especially for Skate Away, which is one of my favorite Dire Straits tracks, are very well crafted.
For all the world like an urban toreador, she had wheels on her feet.
And this sort of, and this goes back to things that the Beatles and the Monkees and people were doing like that in the 60s. The idea that a song could also be a film. And so we start to get that visualization. I remember as I was 16 years old when this came out and just dreaming of what these songs looked like, and then turning on, some late night shows on UHF. Night Flight is the one I remember. And getting to see the songs as the artist envisioned it. And so that was a really significant thing. The other thing about this record, and again, it sounds so good. I mean, it's just, Mark Knopfler was learning to take his time with a song. Instead of, 3.5 minute song, in, out, done, he would take his time. And that Knopfler guitar thing would become a central theme to this music. But also, there's this moment, I just want to take a moment to talk about this, of a new decade. And there was this sense, and maybe it was because I was just, 16 years old, but there was this sense that 1980 was different. That the 70s were the 70s, and, it was the after effect of everything that happened in the 60s, and it was a lot of Steely Dan and album rock and Boston and stuff like that, and that the 80s were going to be different. We started seeing musicians cut their hair short. That was a sign that something was happening. We started seeing a lot more synth. In fact, this was produced by Jimmy Iovine, who Mark Knopfler kind of fell in love with his work because of his production of Patti Smith's Because the Night and the work that he did with Bruce Springsteen. And he actually brought Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band keyboard player, Roy Bittan, in to play keyboards on this. So the keyboards are sort of up front. So that's Roy Bittan on this record. This term was started being bandied about called New Wave. There's a new wave coming. There's a new wave. It's not punk rock. It's not old freedom rock, hippie rock. It's not southern rock. It's new wave. And new wave is going to have keyboards. New wave is going to have short hair. New wave is going to have bright, striking colors, lots of neon. And there was this sense that there is a shift. I mean, even bands like Styx and some of the stalwarts of the 70s were Wings and 79 were kind of gearing up for this new decade of music. And reflecting back on it now, I mean, I think the sort of most quintessential was Gary Newman and Cars. To me, that hearing that in 1980 was like, oh, the 70s are over. The aesthetic of the 70s of the jam band, the shredding Ted Nugent guitar solo, like that's all gone. There's this new aesthetic that stepped in that's tight and neat and punchy, and is making a kind of new artistic statement about things. And, that carried through well into the mid-'80s, especially once MTV comes along and we get Flock of Seagulls and all that kind of stuff. And reflecting on this now and looking back at the videos from this album and just the amount of neon, lots of neon lights. I mean, this is sort of like the Blade Runner vision of the future, was this sort of new wave thing. We haven't really had that since. We haven't really had that. The beginning of the 90s was grunge, in a sense that there was a new sheriff in town. But we really haven't had. I mean, what's the beginning of the 2020s? What was the sense that this is going to be the new Roaring 20s? This is going to be a new decade with a new look and a new feel. And we haven't really had that because everything is so diffuse thanks to the internet and social media. And there's no sort of centralized culture that comes from a specific subculture or a particular way of looking at the world that then presents itself to the world, the way that Beatlemania presented something to the world in 1964, or Woodstock presented something to the world in 1969, or the New York Underground presented something to the world in 1976 with Lou Reed and the Ramones and Patti Smith. This was like a sense that this decade is going to be qualitatively different. So if you're a fan of the 80s, or you're a fan of 20th century rock and roll, think of this record as kind of a dividing point between the old jammy rock out 70s endless Stairway to Heaven, that stuff, and the more punchy, tight, focused a lot on what it looks like music that became the music of the 80s. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. I never stopped playing it. This is it. It still looks great all these years later. Same copy I've had since 1980. Skate Away, Tunnel of Love, Romeo and Juliet. Really, really brilliant. Great music from Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits. All right, that's a quick plug for Changing Times. And let's change the times again, shall we? They really could use it. We need a new aesthetic. We need a new thing that says we are now marking this moment in time. The old stuff is gone. We're going to do it this way now. So I appreciate Dire Straits for helping us do that in 1980. After this record came out, it was critically loved. Their follow-up record was a record called Love Over Gold, which I loved when it came out in 1982. I reviewed it for my college newspaper, and even more expansive and sweeping, but doesn't really hold up over time. Doesn't really capture the vibe that this record did. It's not a record that I go back to. And then the next one was the Brothers in Arms record, which is the I Want My MTV record. I saw the premiere of that song, Money for Nothing, at Live Aid. I was at Live Aid in London, and Dire Straits came out, and Sting came out and did his little bit, and then that song with that great riff. And of course, that took Dire Straits to a whole nother level. Next time we're actually going to we're going to be in the same year as this album. We're going to stay in 1980 and we're going to do a soundtrack. I don't think we've done any soundtracks yet. We're going to do a soundtrack that's not available on streaming. It's not on CD. It's only on vinyl. You'll want to stick around for that. We're going to do that next. But this is the record that really matters. This record matters. This music matters. Vinyl matters. You matter. So let's talk about it.